Hello everyone, my name is Matheus Viegas Ferrari. I'm a PhD candidate in anthropology, especially in urban anthropology here at Paris 8, and in a joint PhD with Universidade Federal da Bahia in Brazil in international relations. My paper is called Surveillance and Prevention Technologies in Paris 2024. I work on the Olympics and research on the Olympics for almost 10 years. With this question, what belongs to the Olympics? I don't know why I did this. This should come first. If you want to download the paper and read at the same time, I'll be reading so I don't get lost myself in my macaronic English. So if you want to follow with me. I'll be starting by showing you what I call 3 snapshots, and then I'll introduce properly the paper. Just for the download link, it's IEA, where we are, underline MVF, which stands for Matheus Viegas Ferrari, underline 23. So it's easy to remember, so I can move on. February 2019, the city of Nice, in the south of France, which is very advanced in terms of video surveillance, experiments with facial recognition in the public space for 3 days during the carnival on several volunteers. In August, it drew up a very positive report, but it was contested by the National Commission for Information Technology and Civil Liberties, la CNIL. In 2018, a Safe City project was signed between the municipality, the metropolis, and a group of companies led by French tech giant Thales. For 3 years, Thales has been given a free pass to deploy its security technologies. A city transformed into an experimentation ground with one objective: to build a digitally monitored territory where technology is used to improve security. Of course, it was a reaction to the terrorist attacks that left 86 victims in 2016. Snapshot 2. In Rio 2016, the American company Logos Technologies, specialized in warfare technologies, provided the authorities with the balloon Chimera, the same that would help troops in Iraq and Afghanistan by providing real-time images 200 meters from the ground. This edition has been particularly excluding and violent to minorities, culminating with the favelas being occupied by the military police and extensively documented human rights violation. Snapshot 3, the Urban Supervision Center in Saint-Saint-Denis, a department to the north of Paris, Rue 93. Inaugurated in May 2021, plans to have 400 video surveillance cameras, mostly with facial recognition, which is still in discussion, by 2024. According to Saint-Denis Mayor Mathieu Anotin, and I quote, by 2024, the center will move at the same time as the municipal police, which I'll talk about, into the former premises of the National Police Station, which will be renovated for the occasion. It will be equipped with 400 cameras, its maximum capacity, for the Olympic Games. For the mayor, these tools allows for a better knowledge of the city on crime, but also, and I quote again, on issues of prostitution or the place of women in the public space. Video surveillance combats street harassment by keeping track of the facts and identifying the harassers, he emphasized. However, this narrative was defied during the recent social movements and strikes, namely as a polemic draft law was voted last January. In particular, Article 7, which I quote, was broadly criticized. And I will read the article, an excerpt of the article. On an experimental basis, and until the 30 June 2025, for the sole purpose of ensuring the security of sporting, recreational, or cultural events which, due to their scale or circumstances, are particularly exposed to the risk of acts of terrorism or serious harm to the safety of individuals, images collected by means of video protection systems and in and around the venues hosting these events, as well as in means of transport and on the premises of the events and their surroundings, as well as in means of transport and on the road serving them and on the road serving them, may be subject to processing, including an artificial intelligence system. What do these 3 seemingly unrelated events have in common other than the surveillance issue that strings them? They all allowed us to create a historical continuum in terms of surveillance technology in France and in the Olympics context. And Paris is in the intersection of both these contexts. in preparation for the 2024 Olympics. Following Nice's steps, it has adopted its own safe city project, and at the same time, it is incorporating a lot of technologies that have been tested in other sports mega event contexts, which are often laboratories, to mass testing technologies in a large sample of people. Coming from Rio and having lived and researched the 2016 Olympics firsthand, I have my fair share of critiques of these sporting mega events. And maybe for this reason, I was somehow open to activist watchwords. And one of those watchwords that has been deeply emphasized in almost every anti-Olympics meetings in Paris was that the 2024 Games would be the opportunity to develop and mass test facial recognition technology. Upon repeating these watchwords to a colleague, he warned me, and he also works on the Olympics for a little bit longer than me. Matheus, watch out. Not everything has to do with the Olympics. Surveillance is one of them. France has always had a surveillance technology culture, in many cases even before China or the US. There are things that belong to the Olympics while others don't. And this presentation is somehow a reaction to this idea that there's something to belong to the Olympics and others don't. As an anthropologist, I have somehow to follow these objects and react to what comes to me. So I try to understand what belongs to the Olympics and what don't. I will summarize this struggle, and my intervention will be built upon the different surprises that brought me to this point, especially how I was surprised during my fieldwork and ethnography. It is the preliminary results of part of my first 2 years of doctorate and aims to raise more questions than to give answers. I will re-articulate these surprises to the multi-sided ethnography, a concept proposed by George Marcus, that I have been developing, which consists mostly of following the people, that is, following official and non-official actors and activists meeting, for example, related to the Olympics. Many times I was astonished, as I said, during my fieldwork. 3 moments in particular will allow me to structure my presentation. The first, as it has been mentioned, relates to the idea that surveillance might not be inherent to the Olympic Games in Paris. At least, as it seems, it is not exclusive to them. The second one concerns the roles of surveillance. And the third, how surveillance and security are correlated. Still under the effect of these watchwords, I took for granted that surveillance was not something to be aspired. I would go further. It was something to be fought against. What my fieldwork has shown is that there is, on the one hand, an official discourse that emphasizes surveillance as a means to valorize the territory, and on the other hand, hence the astonishment, a popular request to being surveilled. First surprise, surveillance in Paris is not exclusive to the Olympic context, but there is a catch to this statement. Since 1995, France has a national law that legalizes public video surveillance by the state. For comparison, there is no federal law in the US that regulates the matter, and in China, as problematic as it is, the mass surveillance system Skynet was only created by the government in 2005. In 2010, the Video Protection Plan of the Paris Police Prefecture, the PVPP, was responsible for the installation of 1,000 cameras. It was designed as a tool for public safety with multiple objectives: public order, traffic and road safety, crime prevention, rescue. In 2015, it would move towards 4,000 cameras and more than 37,000 interconnected cameras throughout the region. This plan is the result of a 16-year partnership deal with the company Iris PVPP, initially concluded for an amount of 225 million euros and already exceeded by 120 million euros. In Metz, northeast of France, in 2020, a facial recognition device was tested at a stadium entrance, drawing criticism from the National Commission, from the CNIL again, for the legality of the project, and from fans. This data was used by the Mass Football Club, as in February 2021. The CNIL issued them for having experimented with facial recognition system to screen people banned from stadiums as part of the anti-terrorism campaign. This gave a precedent to the Roland Garros tournament in the autumn of 2020, where the French Tennis Federation, in partnership with the Strategic Committee for the Security Industry and the 2024 Olympic Games brand team, conducted several surveillance experiments in Paris. This is also the case in Seine-Saint-Denis department, which is the epicenter to all Olympic constructions, where a brand new urban supervision center, which I showed, was opened in 2021. I could go on stating other cases like this, in which surveillance technologies are employed in an innovative way, often in the name of prevention and security. In a previous paper entitled Test Swarm Normalize, I worked the hypothesis, which is open to discussion of course, that under the Olympic banner, exception is in fact normality. In other words, the Olympics are an appropriate venue for legitimizing exceptionality, namely through urban projects that would not be accepted otherwise. But there is a catch. At first look, it appears that the Olympics are an end in themselves. Cities may appear to seek the Olympics for the sake of it, as if the benefits implied by their hosting were enough. When it comes to surveillance, however, this assumption should be reversed. The Olympics are a vehicle for legitimizing exceptionality. That is, all initiatives that would not have otherwise public acceptability. Because the Olympic Games require a high level of security and monitoring, it is easy to believe that the technology connected to these fields is mandatory. I should remind you that they have become a security spectacle only behind wars worldwide in terms of budget, security budget. The legitimacy that accompanies the Olympics is often a profitable way to have access to urban commons and with them a large sample of people, the source of surveillance capitalism surplus, to test their territory-shaping technologies. As political scientist and former soccer player Jules Boykoff has stated, sports are politics by other means. And you probably got the reference from Clausewitz, then Foucault. And I often rephrase this sentence on my own and say that Olympics go beyond the Olympics. When I talk about the Olympics, I'm not talking about the Olympics. Which brings me to my second surprise during my fieldwork. The idea that surveillance is not something to be fought against, not always, at least. And one example that has emerged of such exceptionality is the smartphone application Bien Vu, well seen, which the principle is pretty much the same that was presented yesterday of this Fix My City. It's what it's called, Fix My City, Fix My Street, Fix My Street. I stumbled upon this app during a city council meeting, which is part of my ethnography, organized by Saint-Denis Mayor Matheus Viegas Ferrari. It has been presented as a means to ensure the well-functioning of the GUP, Gestion Urbaine de Proximité, or local urban management. In this occasion, Matheus Viegas Ferrari stated that Saint-Denis has many problems, from pollution, rodents, unauthorized dumping, to violence and dangerous driving. I do not seek to identify their causes or even to attest their truth, but rather I'm trying to understand the reasoning behind the legitimization for an app that aims, and I quote, to report an anomaly in the public space. And I couldn't stress enough the use of the word anomaly. Its premise is that in a few clicks, anyone can send a photo, and I think that's a little bit different from yesterday's case, report an anomaly or an address, and publish an alert which will be directly transmitted to the Plan Commune teams. Plan Commune is an intermunicipal structure made up of 9 communes in Saint-Denis, and which Matheus Viegas Ferrari, the mayor, is also the chairman of this structure. And I think where it's different from yesterday's case is that all information is geolocated. And according to the mayor, and I quote, it's a battle. The one who is the most well-informed wins. During the Q&A session, a middle-aged woman raised her hand and asked whether the photos were mandatory. At first, he didn't know the answer, but after thinking a little, the answer given was yes, it's mandatory. People have to send a photo of the anomaly and report their geolocation. She replied that she lived in front of a bar, whose owner puts the bottles outside on the street. If she were to take a photo, it would be surely frowned upon. Matheus added that littering is not acceptable and the department is heavily investing in video finding, in cameras that are allowed to fine people to give a finding. And then other hands were raised, and this where I was surprised, because I thought that people raised their hands to contest the idea of video finding. But the question that was mostly asked is, if such technology exists, video finding, why wasn't it implemented near where I live? Once again, being used to surveillance as something to be fought against, I was surprised with these requests. However, as I have been underscoring, there is a constitutive discourse of surveillance, namely in an Olympic context. During this meeting, most of the time was dedicated to explaining how host this sports mega event would allow a restructuring of the territory and a changing of the city landscape, because the mayor has different mandates. Often these public meetings talk about Olympics, surveillance, security issues, public lighting, and everything. It is important to highlight that in a liberal continuum, freedom and security are tight-knit. Danger, as many of you have discussed, is often created discursively. Since the end of the 19th century, there is a political culture of danger, in which crime, disease, sexual deviation, unemployment, bankruptcy, or anomalies are to be feared. Michel Foucault, for instance, points out that liberalism is responsible for the internalization of these phenomena as psychological and cultural risks. This governmentality is what makes it possible to directly correlate the question of security with that of freedom. Stricter control becomes necessary to cope with the new risks of life. Here, the notion of biopolitics comes into play because these risks are normalized based on a biological medical discourse, much like the dangers exposed by Matheus. A very, very important part of these meetings was focused on the rats. We talked a lot about rats in Saint-Denis during this meeting. So an example of this biological discourse. The second aspect is what we could call a neoliberalization of the city. That is the intervention of the state as a manager of the constitution of space. The state in this configuration doesn't act directly without the consent of the population. It creates the condition for the population to ask for change and to legitimize every single action of public powers. In this sense, neoliberalism is very liberal. Surveillance isn't imposed top-down as a violation of freedoms. It is a demand in the name of individual freedoms, much like public lighting, for example, in the 17th century. Which brings me to the third moment and surprise. Security should be heavily enforced or reinforced. Much like people are asking for cameras, they are also asking for security enforcement. Namely, during a public meeting in Juni, further north, in October 2022, one of the inhabitants asked how the municipal police would be able to enforce law, if physical force was among one of its new missions. He was referring once again to the GUP, la gestion urbaine de proximité, which is this bottom-up approach sustained by Saint-Denis representatives, which consists in a neighborhood-level urban surveillance. Rephrased otherwise, as the Bienvu app has shown, much of the responsibility of watching, surveilling, and protecting is delegated to the inhabitants themselves. The role of the municipal police has been upgraded in the territory in order to account for this transition of tasks. A new hotline is always available for people to call anytime, report any anomaly, and control the situation while the police is on its way. Security, as discussed, is an effective and efficient means to legitimize exception. As the Olympics are an instrument for urban development, a question that I have not asked yet is what development? What program is sought after? Critics to the Olympics are well known and even accepted by local representatives and the organizing committee, gentrification, environment exploitation, to name a few. From an economic standpoint, Olympic studies show that neither it is profitable revenue-wise for the hosting city, which does not consider in these studies indirect gains such as hotels and tourism, nor it increases tourism in global cities. 1 year before the Olympics, and maybe you have observed this, one could not tell that one of the world's most important cities is about to host this colossal mega event. And why is that the case? I don't know if you realize, but we are 1 year to host, 1 year before the Olympics, and there are no Olympic symbols everywhere. In Rio, one year before, we would talk about the Olympics all the time, everywhere. The answer, once again, lies in what the Olympics are, a means and not an end. We should not expect the Olympics to develop the territory, okay, as it's not one of the IOC's objectives. In other words, development does not belong to the Olympics. Neither should we expect that it will increase tourism or employment rates. We have to understand what the Olympics means for Paris. Much like the recovery games after Fukushima accident in Tokyo, Paris has been struck by terrorist attacks. Nice has been struck by terrorist attacks. And from 2015 onwards, its recognition and capabilities as a global great power has been shaken. The 2024 Olympics do not belong exclusively to Paris or to Parisians. They involve a very, very complex networks of actors, organizers, and investors. It is the international image of the country, its position, international decision-making forums that is at stake. Paris 2024 cannot meet the normal expectations of the Olympic Games. This edition must be exceptional, especially in a securitarian plan, because once again, it's the legitimacy of France as a security-relevant actor that is at stake. I won't have time to talk about the opening ceremony, but I can talk maybe during the questions and answers. For the concluding remarks, as for the two clues on how the Olympics allow for an acceleration of the seemingly natural demand for surveillance and why they are the perfect opportunity to test and normalize a certain number of technologies, I will present them as my concluding remarks. In the Paris 2024 Legacy Plan, a risk lurks around, mostly in reference to the terrorist attacks that I mentioned, which justifies, as the organizers have put, a resilience project or a persistent struggle to face whatever threat decides to come at the Olympics. La Solideo, the delivery agency, plans to conduct experiments and demonstrations of innovative solutions on a small scale, alongside construction and development operations. The Olympics have been recently included in the 2020-2022 industry contract, which has been renovated, of the Strategic Committee for the Security Industry. This contract, which mobilizes public authorities and interest groups, aims to position the French industry as a world leader in a smart city security. And I quoted, sorry. This brings me to the second clue and concluding point, that of smart city. The smart enthusiasm around the globe has resulted in many projects traditionally classified as surveillance and predictive policing tools being rebranded as essential components of the smart city package. Seeking a smart branding is not unusual for cities that want to reinforce security and policing, particularly during or in preparation of mega events, which have become the economic lifeline for many cities that have been forced to replace their industrial base with tourism, which is the case, for example, of Saint-Denis, going through this reconversion. Normalization of surveillance technologies derives from their losing their security dimension and being rebranded as an everyday tool. And the Olympics allows for such process because they are accompanied by a discourse of exceptionality. It is in their nature to be exceptional, as standalone editions that disrupt the normal time, but also in their functioning. They call for an innovative discourse that legitimizes the normalization of the exceptionality, often under the banner of legacy. In many cases, the novelty that accompanies innovation is a rebranding of old practices. The Safe City project, started in Nice and continuing in Paris for the Olympics, is the securitarian correlate of the smart city. A rebranding practice that disrupts the normal time, always in the name of something. Often development, often security, and most of the time both. The question I ask is security and development for whom? Thank you very much.